What is going on, everyone? Welcome to a special recap here on Pro Wrestling Ponderings. I'm your host, James Lascuola, and we are just a few days removed from an action-packed weekend that is the Scenic City Invitational of 2021, and I have the esteemed honor of running down all the action with not just the voice of this year's SCI, Dylan Hales, but also the brains behind this year's SCI, Matt the Mouth Griffin. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great. I
Very
can't believe somebody called Matt the brains of anything. But other than that,
let me have 10 seconds to soak that in and enjoy that.
Oh, will do.
Well, we got another show tomorrow as we speak, as we record this. So just the stressful stuff, back-to-back weeks is a lot, but I enjoy doing it so much and working with people that I really personally care about. So it's a lot of fun. And we're still basking in the SCI glow right now, with everybody still talking about it online and social media. So that's very rewarding to see too, that they had such a good time and are already making plans for next year.
And I mean, I'll be honest, Matt, this was my first year getting to view the Scenic City Invitational. I enjoyed just about every show that I got to watch this weekend. Personally, I'm already starting to make some plans, just like you mentioned, to be there for 2022, hopefully to soak in some awesome wrestling and catch some great down south barbecue.
Got to go to Shuford's. That's the I'm a vegetarian, but that's the spot. That's the spot where I send everybody when they come to the SCI if they want barbecue. There's a couple of locations not far from where we run, so that's a plug for a local business there. Shuford's Barbecue in Red Bank or Saudi Daisy.
Oh, I will definitely put that in my notes, Shuford's. We got quite a lot to run down, and we're even going to have a special appearance by tournament winner AC Mack coming later in the program. So shall we just dive straight in?
Let's do it.
Do it.
Now, I mean, just looking at the night one card, I mean, there's so many matches that could main event promotions all across the country. I mean, just namely looking at Alex Kane versus the one called Manders, Cabana Man Dan versus Jeremy Wyatt. These are some pretty heavy main event caliber matches. And just to start, Matt, if you could walk me a little bit behind the curtain and let me know a little of what goes into putting together these first round matchups.
Oh man. Well, first of all, I really want to have a diverse field. I think that we get a lot of mileage out of just creating unique matches, and so many of them have never happened before. I believe 7 of our 8 first round matches were first time matchups. If you realistically, if you get a field of 16 worthy wrestlers, you could just about pick names out of a hat, and what is going to be left is, for your 8 first round matches is going to be interesting. So in a feel like this, I worked backwards. Myself and Scott Hensley really just all right, who do we want the 4 finalists to be? Okay, what do we want for the second round matches? So really, once we had who we wanted for our 16 set, we just kind of worked backwards from, we basically booked the end of night 2, the beginning of night 2, and then we booked night 1. Of course, then once you get night 1 set, you got to come up with a good order to make things flow. What do we want out of the matches? And so on. And it's always, especially with a field like this, a field of matches like this, it's always kind of a crapshoot, because you don't know how certain wrestlers are going to land. Sometimes it's a well-regarded wrestler from a different area, but people aren't as familiar. Especially in that building, Brett Ison's a champion. It's Jade Newman's promotion, and several other people well known there. So, you're going to have some who are automatically, just by default, because they're known better, going to get better actions than others. So it's really complex. You're just kind of trying to project as to what you think the best order for highs and lows will be, so that everybody, all 8 matches, has a good chance of succeeding and being in a good, correct spot. And I promise you, that's hard.
Oh man, I mean, from the sounds of it, I can honestly imagine it takes a lot of just time and effort to kind of go into putting all these different matchups together and possibly how this one's going to go, how that one's going to go, order the card, flow the card, like you mentioned. But overall, I mean, the work paid off. I mean, 2 strong days of professional wrestling in an awesome tournament. Now, being that you were both in the building, I'm going to start off with Dylan for this question, but how would you describe the energy in the TWE arena over the 2 days?
So it was interesting. I mean, so in the interest of full disclosure, TWE is about 15 minutes from my front door, if that. I hope you guys are enjoying the cicadas in the background, by the way. That's a Dylan Hales Pro Wrestling Ponderings newscast staple. But it's quite literally my home promotion. It's a promotion that I am heavily involved with. So I know the ins and outs of that building pretty well. I kind of have a good feel for what to expect from that crowd typically, but SCI weekend is never a typical crowd. Historically, we've been in high school gyms, although technically the first year in 2015, Scenic City was in a building not really that dissimilar from the TWE Arena, the old Empire Arena. A little bit of a bigger building there, although frankly, a much hotter building too, that Empire building. Matt was shooting ringside cam that year, so he can vouch for me how hot it was in 2015. I was sitting in the front row on the other side of the guardrail. But so in some ways there is sort of that history. In some ways this was like a return to the first year, which I think after a year where we had to take off and there was a COVID reset, situation, like I thought there was something sort of poetic about that return. But the dynamic has always been a little bit unusual compared to a lot of other sort of bigger independent shows, because you have sort of a cross section of your very, very hardcore fans that are traveling from different places. That many of them, it's like literally like the yearly trip they take for a lot of these folks. And then you have your local or regional independent fans who maybe have sort of some, hardcore fandom aspects to them. I mean, they are at an independent wrestling show, but they're not they're not in as deep as the average listener to this podcast, for example. And then you have people who are just TWE fans, who are just casuals, like that's their promotion. Their entire vision of independent wrestling is basically what happens inside those 4 walls every 2 weeks. Maybe they have a little bit of knowledge outside of that, but that's basically their baseline. So I thought coming in that it could create a situation. I mean, I told Matt and Scott flat out, I said, listen, I think AC Mack's going to get a 50-50 reaction. I think Ison and Jaden are going to get huge you know what I mean? Like there were things that, and I think most of the things that we thought would happen did turn out to be the case. I think that probably the biggest surprise of the weekend for me was how responsive and how into Eric Royal the crowd was. Eric Royal, the Action Champion, almost became a babyface in the building, which was an interesting dynamic. But I think that's partially explained by the fact that he wrestled the hated Graham Bell at the yet-to-be-seen TWE event on Thursday night, which I think added some juice to that. But, so there were, dynamic-wise, it was interesting to see how things unfold. The energy was there for sure. I think the energy was there for every show. On Friday night, it's always like people sort of dip their toe in a little bit. And I think there was really like a switch that got flipped during the third match with Graham Bell and Daniel Garcia. But that's not to say they weren't into the opening matches at all. I just think the sort of a switch got flipped there. And the nights were, it was high energy. I mean, it was wall to wall. The room was packed. We did commentary in a very unusual place at TWE. It's not anywhere near where we normally set up. We were in the very, very far back of the room, myself and Mose. And we had a little bit of area carved out for us, but basically where we were standing was the only place in the entire room that was not filled with fans. I mean, there were standing room only places. I mean, I don't know how well that translated to TV because of how that room gets shot. It has that studio look, but it was as packed as you could legally be in that building. Maybe more, to be honest. So, the atmosphere was wild.
Now, Matt, I mean, your angle of the energy of that weekend, how would you describe it?
The SCI crowd was interesting because they are you have to earn their reaction first off. It's not it's real old school where a heel can just come out and say, shut up, all of you. Everyone would just stare. But once you really do earn their reactions with work rate and good personality, they are very much appreciative. They won't. This is definitely not going to be like a you effed up type of crowd. About the most you would get on any sort of blown spot or something bad or corny would just kind of be silence for the most part. I mean, it's interesting because it's very much like a traveling weekend vibe, like you get with the WrestleMania shows, typically, because the whole event, the whole weekend is just centered around wrestling, and people are talking matches. And we had, once the brackets were fully announced, so many guesses, so everything was all over the place. I think what I'm most proud of is that it was very difficult to predict finalists and winners. So I think it was a great vibe, especially night two. Night two was wall to wall. I mean, we started out with a surprise. And we didn't advertise, and nobody knew that Kevin Koo was going to be there. So as soon as the Cranberries started, people started to pop and realize that, oh shit, we're getting, because we like to underpromise and overdeliver. And we had the same vibe later in the show when we brought O'Shea Edwards out as a surprise. And the tournament matches, I mean, we had a rematch of one of the more anticipated independent matches of the year in Eric Royal and Daniel Makabe. We knew we were going to go with that and basically give everybody about 24 hours to digest that was coming. I had a lot of people, as round one was going on, tell me that at intermission that they really want to see Alex Kane versus John Davis. So I had to kind of be like, oh, that sounds interesting. That would be cool. We should do that sometime because, of course, that's one of the matches that was there. So it's especially night two. I mean, it was, I don't think we could really realistically fit even another 10 people in that building. And it was great reactions for both the finish of Futures and for the finish of SCI.
Man, I mean, that big fight sort of atmosphere, sort of super no vacancy, sold out feel really did shine through the production, albeit, like Dylan mentioned, it might come off on screen as more of a studio sort of crowd, but it was, again, just tremendous time. And, we're starting off, like you mentioned, with an opener of AC Mack and Big Beef. And I'll be honest, this right off the bat, this first match was where my bracket busted, like, immediately. I mean, I tried to make no secret though, but Big Beef has been one of those guys that I've just been eyes locked on through the year, just through Limitless, through Paradigm, wherever he's popping up. And to see him get that big SCI stage to, make a push for the finals or make a push even for round two, that was a huge deal to me. I mean, your thoughts, guys, on the match?
Dylan, you want to go first because you called the match, so you're going to have instantly a better.
I'll take it first. I mean, look, I thought it was a good opener. I think that I'm just going to say it. We'll peel back the curtain. We're using observer brain here, not PWI brain, when we've been talking about this so far. So I'll stick with that. I think there was a challenge in this tournament. I think for two competitors in particular, and those two competitors I think were Beef and Grant Bell, who we'll talk about soon here. In the sense of, if you're looking at a field of 16, James's pick notwithstanding, I think most people, especially, when Beef had, was kind of a last minute addition, I think a lot of people look at that and they go, okay, AC's winning in the first round, right? And that creates a challenge because now you have to find a way to convince people that AC could lose. And I think, there were some sort of unique storytelling aspects. I like the dichotomy of the styles between Beef and AC because Beef is such a hard-nosed guy. And, of course, AC Mack is the most anti-chops wrestler on the independent. and you know, I did think there was an interesting dynamic there. I thought they were really smart. I mean, I will say this. I think the sort of narrative for AC Mack over the course of the tournament sort of being subtly established in that first match where he comes up nursing an injury off of an offensive move nonetheless, right? I thought was the right way to do things. I'll just put it that way without saying anything more. I thought that was the right way to do things, and I think that it set a good short, and it was also kind of like an Easter egg thing because it wasn't over the top. It let fans kind of notice that maybe he was nursing a little bit of an injury, but without like beating people over the head that like, oh, he's not going to be able to walk, you know? And I that sort of stuff in the tournament setting, I think is important because so much of what makes the first round work. And I think this is one of the reasons that the reactions to the first round are always a little bit different than the second round. In the first round, I think a lot of fans approach it with like almost a fantasy football aspect, right? Where it's not just who your favorite player is, but who you think is going to win. So sometimes if you're playing the bracket game, you're almost rooting against your favorite because you've decided you think this person is going to win. And it creates an interesting dynamic. But I thought it was a good opener.
And I mean, beef. You look visually, you know, without knowing too much about the wrestlers. You know, it may not lend itself to you thinking it's going to be a really good the type of match that they gave. But beef, in particular, in 2019 had a match with a smaller guy, actually pretty similarly built to AC Mack in Ben Carter. And he had more of a Ben Carter type of match than Beef match. So Beef, it's not. He's a very versatile performer that you can put with a lot of different talents. That's what I really like in SCI because I want people to have different types of matches. I don't want to just have the type of wrestler who's kind of one dimensional. It's like, all right, they're going to come out do these 3 trademark spots. And then once they do those 3 trademark spots, you can start rooting because the match is going to end eventually. You know, like lots of wrestlers unload the clip every single match. And once they've done so, you know, the match is basically over. You know, Beef's a pretty versatile guy. So we had some conversations when he was going to come in with what to do. And we like the AC Mack idea because AC can wrestle. AC is similar. He can work with a lot of different size guys and had really good matches with him.
And yeah, I mean, AC Mack again, coming out on top of that one, really great performance all around by these two. AC Mack, like you mentioned, I've seen him against several different kinds of competitors, and honestly, I've yet to see a AC Mack match that was less than good, and that's just a testament to his work rate. But moving on to the next first round matchup, which I will say with a shameless plug, it was proudly sponsored by us here at Pro Wrestling Ponderings, was that dude, John Davis, taking on Logan Creed. And this one, to me, this was just a certified big man throwdown. 2 big dudes clubbing it out for that round 2 spot. Gentlemen, what's your take on this match?
I'm going to go first again because I can. I think if you were looking at this on paper, this might have been the biggest upset of the first round. I get that if you're not somebody who follows action closely, and shame on you if you're not, you should check us out on IWTV. But you might not know as much about Logan Creed as some other people. But in action, he's been basically unstoppable, you know. And I know that I listen to a lot of fans sort of give their predictions and their brackets. I mean, well over a dozen people I asked, like, who do you think's winning? Like, you know, that's the fun part for me is just listening to the speculation. And the only person I know who had Davis losing in the first round, oddly enough, is my dad. Our Creed losing in the first round, rather. Everybody else had Creed winning. And a lot of people had Creed going to the finals. So, like, now having said that, that to me puts the pressure on even more for these guys to deliver. And I thought they had a much more creative match than you might look on paper if you just saw these 2 names. And, you know, John Davis, I can't say enough good about him. He was a great guy to have around all weekend, for sure. And just a great, he's a great guy to have around all weekend long, in the locker room, on the shows. This was a fun match, totally different than the first match also.
Yeah, John Davis is, if you can do a good job on a show like this and put some indie vets in the locker room, that's always going to be like a force multiplier, because they're not just going to go ahead and apply what they know to their own match. They're the type who can, give notes and ideas and possible finishes and help agent matches. So, and I'll just, I'll peel back the curtain too. John Davis was actually pretty instrumental. He showed up probably about for a Future show, and he helped and listened to a lot of the young wrestlers on Futures and gave pointers and gave some post-match critiques. So that's really helpful, and that's flattering too, that somebody like John, who's been around a number of years, is having such a good time that he could just hang out in the hotel room or go to the pool on Saturday, but instead he came out to watch everybody else wrestle. And there was a couple who were like that. And when you get a chance to be on a show and have somebody watch who will give you that critique and pick, and let you pick their brain, that's a huge asset to have. And I liked the fact that I think everybody knew that Logan Creed was going to win, and then he didn't. We like to have upsets. I like to be unpredictable, and somehow it just worked out that this year was wildly unpredictable all over the board for people.
Man, I'm going to be honest, I was actually in the Papa Hales camp of John Davis beating Logan Creed personally, which, by the way, shout out to Papa Hales as always. But
don't encourage him. Don't encourage him, James.
Do not encourage him.
I got a lot of love for Papa Hales. I always love seeing him ringside, but just John Davis, I've been a fan for such a long time, where he's always had a solid match on the card, no matter where on the card he's been, and him being kind of one of those long-standing veterans of the independent wrestling world. Like, again, I'm happy to hear that he's able to sort of, I guess, give back, so to speak, with the younger people coming up, like you mentioned in Futures. But again, a super physical beating match, but it gets much more physical in this next one, as Daniel Garcia came all the way from Buffalo to take on Graham Bell, and oh my god, this match felt like it was going to go straight down to the wire. I mean, I love matches like that, because when they say 15 minutes have passed, 5 minutes remaining, that the immediate thought that goes into both their heads is just finishing the job. They can't make any missteps. They got to put everything into just putting the other guy away, and like just the amount of holds and going hold for hold like they did just absolutely blew me away. Almost ended up being my match of the weekend. Definitely in my top 3, but almost walked away as my match of the weekend, which we'll get to later on in this recap. But starting with you, Matt, what were your thoughts on this match?
Well, first off, I want to detail and give credit to Red Death, because he wrestled in Jacksonville on Wednesday night. He woke up, flew from Jacksonville to Atlanta, and Atlanta to Buffalo, got to go home for a couple hours, unpack, repack, grab his 3 belts, hop on a plane in Buffalo to Charlotte, arrived in Chattanooga about 12:15 a.m. Thursday night. So he had 4 flights in one day. And just to give you some perspective on IWTV 100, wrestling an hour with Wheeler Yuta, he had, again, I know because he was staying with me and I set the alarm, he had about an hour of 20 minutes of shut-eye, if that, before leaving. We left for the airport at 4:40 a.m. Sunday morning so that he could get up to Philly for IWTV 100. So that was his travel weekend, first off. And he's funny because he wakes up in the morning, he woke up every morning and said, "Let's make history, gentlemen." which was he was incredible to deal with, and he's got a good rep, and that's only going to improve. Gosh, to even think about the match, I can tell you that peeling back the curtain, when Graham Bell saw the match, he was very flattered, because Graham's somebody who he earned a spot by coming in both to TWE, to Action. Heck, he came in and did a scrambled match in 2019 for SCI, and that's how I ended up talking with him and liking him and wanting to give him some shots. And when he's had the chances, he's done everything he can to deliver. If a Graham Bell match doesn't go well, the one reason it's not because of a lack of effort, because you'll get an absolute max effort from Graham Bell every time. So I know that he was looking at this, and I mean, all 8 matches really were, to be honest. That was the vibe in the backstage area, because we did have monitors and people could watch what was going on, but everybody wanted to top it, and to make sure that their match, but top in a way where their match was unique, was different from the match that just happened right before, and was creative in their own way. Not top it as in like, well, we're gonna do 3 moonsaults. So gosh, Garcia and Bell was just a freaking war, and they absolutely left it all out there. I'm real proud of Graham for being able to take a step up on the main stage, and hopefully open some eyes to him. I know that several wrestlers have told me that they got contacted and got booked in other places off of their Scenic City performances. So that's flattering. And as far as anything with the actual match with Graham, I know Dylan's going to be better because he was able to sit there and watch all the matches, and I'm agenting stuff. But the building reaction as Graham and Garcia, they went about 16 or 17 minutes, I believe, just kept going. And had they gone any longer, and I think a lot of people would have figured it was going to be a time limit draw situation.
Yeah, I thought they had a great match. I mean, listen, I said it was beef. I think this match, even more so than the beef and AC match, and I told Graham this to his face, and I love Graham, right? But I told him to his face, the reason this was a great match was not because of any individual moment, although there were some great ones, the struggles for the choke, the way they worked the entire match. I mean, it's very, very smart. But the reason the match was great is because if you're looking at this match on paper, knowing the week Daniel Garcia's had, knowing what's ahead for him with IWTV 100 on that Sunday, and potential future stuff with AEW that had already been announced, nobody is looking at this match on paper and thinking Graham Bell is going to win. I mean, I get it. I shouldn't say nobody, but it's probably 95-5, right? If you're breaking down a percentage. And I think the reason this was a great match is because there became a point in the match where the crowd became convinced that Graham could win. And if you can do that, if you can take a match that feels like it's a no-brainer, no doubt, we 100% know who's winning, and turn it into a match where the crowd starts to think the other guy is going to win, you've done something right? That's part of the magic of pro wrestling. So I thought it was great. I thought it was the match Graham needed. I thought it was a very impressive kickoff to Daniel Garcia's independent wrestling weekend, which was crazy, to say the least. And I think it kind of set a standard for the rest of the week.
Oh, it absolutely did. I mean, you mentioned that it was like a 95-5 split of people who thought that Graham could beat Garcia. I bet it was even a smaller split of people that could have imagined that he'd take him to the 15-minute mark, where it's like time's ticking at that point. So, I mean, Graham Bell...
That's true. That's a great point, James. I think that's a great point.
Thank you. I mean, just being able to take Garcia to a possible, time limit situation, too, that's also a huge, huge, huge feather that Graham Bell could put in his cap. I mean, over the course of the year, I've really started to get into Graham Bell, and I'm really loving what he's putting out as far as ring work, and I can't wait to see how much further that ring work takes him. But we move into another match that could have gone straight down to the wire in the Monarch Jeremy Wyatt taking on Cabana Mandan. This was much like the match before. This was a lot of excellent holds, a lot of crisp, beautiful wrestling, and like I honestly was hoping that it was getting down to the seconds because I just wanted more out of both of these competitors. And Matt, I'll start with you again. Your thoughts on the match?
This was a match that people were the type of match where people were like, I did not know that I wanted this match, and after it was announced, they were really excited for it. There was actually a lot of excitement for this match, and Jeremy Wyatt, somebody we really liked, and he was very glad to participate in the weekend. And he's not somebody I know. Actually, I probably know him the least of the 16. But he's a pro, so it was really nice they were able to get him. He was on one of those SCI. We'd love to be able to book this guy wish lists. I thought the match was really good. Cabana Man Dan is maybe not anymore, but since he really transformed himself in the last year since the lockdowns began, with his look, and let's face it, he's gotten jacked. So he's the type who can go toe to toe with Cabana Man Dan. I know that Dylan will tell you, I'm gonna steal your thunder, that Cabana Man Dan is one of the best baby faces in the South and all of independent wrestling. So when you've got somebody who's so good and so known for being a little more dastardly with Jeremy Wyatt, it gives you a lot to work off too. Yeah, very happy with it, and there was a lot of people who were 50-50 on that match as well.
I think that was probably the toughest match to pick in the first round on paper, honestly. I mean, I should note now, by the way, I've moved on from the cicadas to traffic you're going to hear in the background. But I thought that was the toughest match to pick on paper. Like, if I'm looking at it purely because it was one of two first-round matches, the other we'll get to shortly, where you sort of had the veteran versus veteran dynamic. You have the difference with this, though, was in that other match, which in theory was two heels versus two heels until the crowd decided they loved Eric Royal. This match was obviously, on paper, you're looking at it, you got a very, very intense, hateable bad guy in Jeremy Wyatt and a very, very lovable babyface in Cabana Man Dan. And I think that dynamic made this match very interesting on paper. I thought it was the most traditionally good match of the first round. And what I mean by that is, like, you could see how good these guys are at the fundamentals of pro wrestling. And I mean, that's totally to be expected, to be honest. I was very, very pleased with it. I thought that they were kind of in a tough spot having to follow Bell and Garcia, which was such a dramatic high point in certain ways. But the crowd was really into Dan, and I think that came through. And I think the match delivered in large part because the crowd was into Dan so much, and Wyatt is a guy who's not afraid to make people hate him. Like, so many guys are afraid to be hated. Wyatt is not one of those. So, yeah, it's really good.
And it was like it was said before. It's one of those matches where you walk in not expecting to be wanting it as much, but then it happens and you just want more. But as we roll into this next match, I mean, it's another battle of the big men as the suplex assassin Alex King takes on the one called Manders. I mean, two big men squaring off, but a little bit of a clash of styles where Alex Kane is much more of that suplexing, grinding out on the mat kind of heavyweight, wherein one called Manders, he's got that roughneck, rough and tumbles, almost Stan Hansen-esque style to him. I mean, I'll go back to you, Dylan. What are your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, so, I mean, like, in some ways, I agree with you that there is some variance here. But also, I think in some ways this is like two guys almost looking in a mirror from the perspective of their relative trajectories through the world of Scenic City in particular. Manders was a futures winner. Kane did not win futures, but was in the match in 2020. That was like the match everybody talked about from the tournament. And it was really futures that, frankly, it was his hard work at futures, not futures. I want to make that distinction very clear. But it was his hard work at futures that I think really elevated him and helped him get in the position that he's in. And of course, futures in 2020 took place in the same building. So it was kind of a homecoming for Alex in that regard. And I thought, of course, Miss Donna was there cheering on Manders. That's another story. But, it was a family show, and thank God, or we might have had like a panty throwing incident. But it was a, I thought they had a hard hitting match that was distinct from the previous Hoss fight on the show, which I liked. I think that this is another one of those, like the aforementioned Wyatt and Cabana Van Dam match, that you realistically could go either way. I think I said on commentary that I felt like this was a match where maybe the winner might even be the favorite in the tournament in some ways, just because of the momentum of Kane and Mander's pedigree, in Scenic City lore, so to speak. But it was it was a good match. This was probably the first match too on either show that got a little bit wild. They did some crazy stuff out there on the floor, and there was not a lot of room to do it, and they did it anyway. So it was a fun match.
Yeah, Manders. Manders was our 2019 Futures champion, and was basically on a good trajectory with us when things got stopped because he was, of course, I don't remember if he was announced for 2020, but he was definitely going to be in our 2020 field.
Yeah, he was one. I'm fairly sure he was announced.
Okay, I think he was, but my memory, how bad my memory is. And of course, I saw and had all 16 entrant graphics. So sometimes I got a little confused as to who we actually did announce and who we didn't. But, and Alex Kane, he did our future show that we did in October. That was the first time I met him, liked him personally, liked him even more after I saw him wrestle. And then he started at Action Wrestling in November and has become a staple. I mean, he's one of our main guys, and because he went out and got his own entrance music, and it's got a very specific beat, and it talks about Alex Kane. I mean, the crowd actually sings along to it. It's definitely a different vibe, but it's all a superstar vibe for Alex Kane. So yeah, they got a little wild. I mean, Manders, he's doing a lot of stuff with Game Changer and No Peace, and he's getting violent. He may or may not have asked if he would be disqualified in the match if he brought a door out to the ring, and I told him he would be, so he did not stop and get a door. That's a legit question that was asked. I said, well, that would be a DQ in a tournament like this. So then they proceeded to get even wilder on night 2, which that was that was a match that was on Alex Kane's list too. He wanted to work with Manders because I think he sees that Manders has been on a path that he wants to be on. Kane was in Futures. He didn't win, Manders did, but he's seen that Manders worked himself up, paid a lot of dues, and then has gotten on to a lot of the big shows. So that Kane really did want to wrestle Manders. And they made us look like geniuses for putting that match together.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the match got crazy out of hand, and in the end, Alex Kane won. Unfortunately, for one called Manders, he wouldn't move on to that next night in the tournament, but he did get a big showing out the next night. But we also, keeping in the big boy spirit, we have Eric Royal versus Derek Neal, which sort of in the spirit of the last match as well. I mean, Derek Neal having that rough and tumble sort of brawling, grinding out style as New South's champion, taking on your reigning and defending Action champion in Eric Royal, who I honestly can't really even pin to a style. He's just so diverse in the way he wrestles. I mean, gentlemen, your thoughts on the match? I thought this was an excellent one.
So okay, I go. Actually, you Matt, you go ahead because no, you go first because I have a filibuster on this.
I was just gonna say that Eric Royal is such, you look at him and you assume he's going to be one type of wrestler, and he's absolutely not. He's a guy I can literally put and have literally put with anybody. I've put Eric Royal in the ring with wrestlers that are about 150, 160 pounds. I think we put him in the ring with guys who are bigger than him, and he has such a unique mindset to the way he approaches his offense, in making it believable and trying new things and really working not just to get his moveset over, but how to get the other wrestlers' moveset over. So and actually, just to tie it back in, before I started Action Wrestling in August 2017, Ace was at SCI. He wrestled Kurt Stallion in the second round, Dylan.
That's correct. And they did a finish that I was certain they'd never do, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. Watch that on IWTV.
That's a super good match. 2017 round 2 with Kurt and Eric. And it was that weekend that I got to know him a little bit. And then a couple months later, when I was like, yes, I am going to start up trying to run shows, he was one of the first guys that I thought I want that should be a part of it, of Action Wrestling. So it's just somebody else who got into our family of promotions through SCI.
Yeah, so my filibuster on this is Derek Neal is one of the most hated guys, maybe the most hated guy in the TWE building ever. So we should have known that this was not going to be heel versus heel, but I don't think we fully knew until they walked to the ring. And I think it's a testament to both how good a bad guy Derek Neal is, but also how versatile Ace is, that he could just roll with it. Like a lot of guys are so mentally wedded to whatever they're doing at a given moment that it's very, very hard to change speeds. And I think that shows the veteran skill there. I mean, this was the second true sort of veteran dream match on the show, with Wyatt and Cabana Van Dam being the first. I thought the fan engagement on this one really is what set this apart. It was sort of a traditional fan engagement match, but with a more heavy-hitting, almost like 80s All Japan style of wrestling. And I think it made it, to me, this was one of the most interesting matches to watch and do commentary for on the show. It's hard to pick favorites, and I've said this before, and I truly mean this, when you're doing commentary, because it's different than sitting and watching the show as a fan. It's even truly great matches, you sometimes don't necessarily know because you're so focused on trying to help tell the story and trying to make sure that you're presenting these guys to the best of your ability. But this was, to me, one of the most interesting matches to do commentary for. I really enjoyed it.
Well, and Derek has been a champion in that building. He came in as the Hugh Mungold champion of New South Wrestling, but he has also been the TWE champion. So he's got a lot of credibility. And Eric Roy
has not been the TWE champion.
Wait, has he not?
No.
He hasn't?
Matt is crowning people in our building. This is a horrible offense. No, he has long been one of the most hated people in that building. I mean, for probably 2 years now.
I assume anybody good has been a champion in that building. So redact the last 25 seconds of this podcast.
And well, I mean, moving into a match that really had the fans in the building going hard. Number 1, Jaden Newman taking on Pitbull Brett Eisen. And I mean, Dylan, I think you're probably the best place to start with just talking about this match in general, as you know quite a lot about these two, especially in the TWE.
Yeah, to me, this was the emotional peak of night one. And that's not a knock on the main event, which I thought was very good and was good in a different way. But, Jaden and Brett, to a large degree, have been sort of the defining guys of the Tennessee Independents for the last couple of years. Now, that's not a knock on AJ Gray, who holds the Bone Storm Championship, and who many people would say is sort of the biggest star out of Tennessee right now. I'm not sure I would even disagree with that. It's not a knock on Kevin Koo, who has done some huge things, but Koo has been more focused on tag teams until recently. But Jaden and Brett, when you think of the salt of the earth Tennessee Indies, the guys who came out of the Tennessee indie scenes, were developed within that framework, and have pushed forward to sort of break out into bigger platforms. To me, those are the two guys that are the first people that come to my mind. And I don't know, I thought they had a really good match. Jaden coming in had never beaten Brett. I don't know if he'd ever even beaten him in a tag team setting. The last time they'd been in that building, they'd gone to a draw, time limit draw. Brett had recently beaten Jaden pretty definitively on the last Southern Underground Pro tapings. It's just, there's a long-standing dynamic there. And, of course, we've got our triple threat match for the TW Championship coming up in a couple weeks between those two and Graham Bell. So that story's not over either. But, you know, it's not just that Jaden won, it's that Jaden tapped him out. And like Brett doesn't tap out really ever. So to me, this was the emotional peak of the show. I could see some people having this as their best match. I could also see some people being like, I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't the emotional peak for me. And I get that, because if you're not sort of deeply embedded in that history, I understand that. That's what I was trying to get across on commentary. I hope I did it service that it deserved. But yeah, I thought this match was really good. And it was probably the match I was most proud of, both because of my work with these guys individually and their work themselves and what they've meant to that building. Honestly, this match could have main evented. That's not a knock on Matt or Scott. It's not a knock on match order. It really could have been the main event. That's how important those guys are to the building. And I thought they delivered a match that had the emotional resonance that you want for a match with those two in that building on the biggest show of the year.
I mean, a lot of emotion really going into that match, with the crowd really truly coming to life with just how much meaning those two have associated to the area. I mean, Matt, did you expect such a huge reaction to this match?
I did, and that's the reason that when looking at matches, this match was definitely a second half match, and really it had to be one of the last two matches. I want to ask you, were you shocked at the finish?
Man, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, one of my first shows that I got to see when I first subscribed to IWTV, all the way back in 2019, just getting a little historical here, was Southern Underground Pro. I believe it was All Hell Breaks Loose. The main event was JD Drake versus Ison versus O'Shea versus Henry, and the show kicked off with Jaden Newman taking on One Called Manders. I mean, to see them from that point when I started watching to now, it's such a huge, I almost want to say maturity, or coming to, not to say coming to age, but just coming to in that time, just to this sort of huge, what felt like a huge main event level match. It was just incredible to watch.
And it was difficult with these last two matches. I debated, the last three were basically like I debated all of them. Like, you know, if we put this match here, what happens to the other matches? I decided to go with, I knew that Jaden and Brett would be an emotional point for a lot of fans that were there. I decided that the championship match has to be last. Daniel Makabe is a defending champion, and that was kind of my tiebreaker as to why that was last. I mean, Jaden and Ison, they really delivered. They have before in that building, you know, in the prior weeks, but they really delivered, as did really everybody trying to have the best match they could. On, you know, the live stream numbers were good, the Twitter engagement was good. I was told, I don't understand like the metrics and such, but I was told that the SCI hashtag for night one was trending, which is definitely a cool thing that a lot of people are watching and talking about it and engaging. So I definitely think of all the matches that this was very easily the emotional high point, and a lot of people were shocked at the finish, which again I take as a very good thing. You need to have a lot of unpredictability in tournaments.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you could kind of sort of trace the lines to who's going to make it from point A to point B in the finals, I mean, what fun is that in a tournament setting? Because, I mean, like you mentioned, just the diverse set of contenders, and even in my interviews and articles leading up to the tournament, I specifically said, like, you could put the poster up on the wall and you could toss a dart, and each outcome really just feels about as possible and as reasonable a winner as the last outcome. I mean, honestly, that's a mark of a tremendous tournament. Now we walk into our main event, both competitors, which I've gotten the pleasure of conversing with going into it. The wrestling genius Daniel Makabe taking on the loaded arm Adam Priest. And I mean, the one thing they both had to say about each other is just the similar but different styles they bring up, because where Daniel Makabe is very much the scientific Bret Hart in the ring, Adam Priest, he's the rough and grind down sort of Arn Anderson style of technician. I mean, Matt, what were your thoughts on the main event?
I really enjoy. Daniel. I'm going to be biased. I'm probably the worst person to ask because he knows this. I've told him, but Daniel Makabe is my favorite wrestler. And I am really a huge fan. And I really enjoy Adam Priest's work. Adam Priest has gotten some definite feature matches with me because I like him personally, and I really enjoy what he does. And he's got despite how he acts, obviously everything's gonna be kayfabe on Twitter, but he's got a great attitude to the business. I mean, heck, he broke his arm on Have Fun Be Sad in Tampa. He had to have surgery. We talked on the phone, and when he was going to have surgery, and it's like, all right, how long is it going to be out? He's like, and just don't forget about me. I'm like, forget about me. I'm not even canceling your bookings. I'm like, I still want you to show up and cut promos. So, and do an angle. I'm like, forget about you. So these two, I mean, when looking at that field of 16, it was like, who's going to have the likely to have the best wrestling match? Who's going to give Makabe the best first round match? And Adam Priest had a hell of a wrestling weekend too. It was basically a salute to how much I think of Adam's abilities. And I really did like the finish too. Adam Priest got so tied up by Makabe that he could just not move. He could just about not move and ended up getting pinned. It was a different finish than I think any of the other matches had. It wasn't a high impact. It wasn't a submission or pass out. It was just, I'm going to move your shoulders to the bat and hold them for 3.
Dylan, your thoughts?
Yeah, now we've entered the stage where I'm huffing and puffing because I'm walking up a hill. That said, it's like the 3 stages of Dylan Hales tonight. But I thought this was a fascinating match on paper that was, I listened to Priest when he was on, and Priest sort of said, well, I didn't think we had a lot in common. Like he sort of portrayed himself as having a lot of stylistic variance with Daniel. And while there's some truth to that, I think they both have they're both sort of wrestlers. And what I mean by that is people want to wrestle them. They have a mind for wrestling. They think about their matches. They're creative without being obsessed with innovation. Not that they don't have the ability to innovate, but that's not the most important thing to them in terms of what they're trying to get across with what they're doing in the ring. And for that reason, I thought this was a very good first round match. I really liked the match. I thought the finish was dynamic, and it was something that was teased later in the tournament, which I love. Priest acquitted himself well. I mean, Priest is sort of, Makabe is also my favorite wrestler, but Priest has sort of become this guy who has quietly been in there with sort of a who's who of the independent. I mean, just this year, he's been in the ring with, Wheeler Yuta, Matt Mikowski, Daniel Makabe, Kevin Koo, Logan Easton LaRoe. Like, he's been in there with a lot of guys who are considered top level guys.
Jonathan Gresham. Did you say Jonathan Gresham? Jonathan
Gresham, not technically an independent guy, but kind of. He's still taking independent dates. And there's a lot of people who think Jonathan Gresham is the best wrestler on the planet, including, by the way, Daniel Makabe. So I think that Priest is showing, just by virtue of being in there with these guys, how good he is. And, this is the beginning of Adam Priest's story, not the end. You know what I mean? And I think the fact that he came in his first Scenic City Tournament and he main evented on night 1, that's pretty good. It's like, for a guy at his relative experience level, because he's nowhere near as experienced as a lot of the guys in this field, for him to be somebody that everybody was confident enough to put in that main event spot and know he would deliver, and he did, I think is a testament to his abilities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Daniel Makabe versus Adam Priest, that was a big way to end the show, but we have a huge huge guest that just joined us at this moment. I mean, who better to have on the show than the winner?
Oh, no. I got this. You have on the show the best guest you ever had, the best guest you ever will have. Born and raised in the swats of Atlanta, Georgia, the 2021 Scenic City Invitational winner, the Mack of all trades, AC Mack.
Well, wow, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I mean, AC, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing exceptionally well.
And I'm glad to hear it. And first and foremost, I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the room here by saying congratulations on the hard-fought win over SCI weekend. Again, just well fought and through.
Thank you. Long time coming.
Well, I mean, we just wrapped up talking night one, but I'd like to, if it's all the same for the room, take a couple steps back to sort of get your angle on the night one contest between yourself and Big Beef.
That was interesting because we've never worked before, so we didn't, I didn't really know what to expect. I had seen a few things here and there, but I just wasn't sure. And then being out there was a lot of fun with him. He's very intense. He's deceptively fast. So I definitely want to get in there with him again with even more time and just kind of see what all he's capable of, because that was very, very interesting. When he hits you. You are definitely awake.
And I mean, I'll be honest here too. I mean, just like I told Dylan, like I told Matt, that match right off the bat busted my bracket. No offense, but I mean, I'll admit I've been on the beef train for a while, but I mean,
yeah.
After that convincing win, I mean, you really blew me away with how you went through the rest of this tournament.
Good, thank you. Yes. Yes, I was trying to make a point. I was just trying to get not get through it, but just to let you know that not only do I want to win, but I'm trying to say here unanimously. I wanted everybody to think, wow, he definitely earned that one, or he definitely took that one. So that was my goal.
Well, before we touch night two, we have a little bit of a detour going into the Scenic City Invitational Futures. Now, starting off from sort of the competitive angle, I mean, AC, was there anybody in Futures this year that really caught your eye as a competitor?
Oh my gosh, yes. Eli Knight, obviously the winner, Robert, Landon Hale, Whispers. That was my first time seeing him live. Hoodfoot is always a treat to see live. Who else? It was definitely a few. I got to watch the whole show, so I was really excited for that.
Well, I mean, I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction for talking Futures. There were 3 first round matches that were all, honestly, in their own rights, they were all excellent to a T. Mm-hmm. I'd like to go around the room, and I'll start with you, AC. Which first round match was your favorite and why?
I'm gonna go with Eli, Landon, and Whispers. That was my favorite, just because it was a high energy match. A lot of different creative things were going on. I saw things in that match that I have never seen before, and I watch a lot of wrestling. Wrestling comes on every day now, so I see a lot of wrestling, and that was pretty cool to see something I had never seen before. So yeah, that's my pick.
All right, and going around the horn, Dylan, your favorite first round Futures match and why?
Can I just say for the record, I really enjoyed AC being put on his back heels and not being sure of himself for once. That was a great moment there where we put him in the hot seat immediately. By the way, the cicadas are back for me as I continue my 2-mile walk home on this call. The peak of professionalism here on my part. I honestly liked all 3 matches for completely different reasons. If you're forcing me to pick, if I absolutely have to pick one, I think I would pick Robert Martyr, Merrick Donovan, and Hoodfoot. And I think the reason I would pick that one is because I really, really liked how they got into the end of that match. I thought it was very, very clever. It was obviously it was a hard hitting match, but I also think it kind of set a tone for Martyr, of course, who went on to win, which is he's in there with two obviously beefy, tough guys, and he's not backing down. And I think that was sort of the narrative for him in this tournament. And I thought the way he projected and carried himself in that match was outstanding because it didn't come across as not credible. And I think a lot of times when you have guys like that who are smaller guys, they sort of come across almost when they're trying to project that level of intensity. There's a fine line between coming across as intense and coming across as like Scrappy Doo. You know what I mean? And Martyr doesn't come across that way. Like, he's not a big dude, but you believe that he believes in himself so much that his lack of fear is totally justified. And I really, really like that match for that reason.
Matt, your favorite match and why from round one of Futures?
I really my style tends towards high flying, and I really love that match. But I also liked the match that Dylan just talked about. That's also the match that I had my hands in the most in agenting and working through that particular finish in the execution and the timing. I literally made Merrick and behind the scenes, but I made Merrick Donovan and Robert get in a position that's like, okay, now what are you going to do right before this? Okay. And then Robert kicks over. I'm like, no, you can't just kick over. I'm like, I actually guided through to make sure. I'm like, I wanted them to have the absolute best looking and best earned finish out of that possible. It was very hard hitting. And just a story about Merrick Donovan and how he got into Futures himself. He invested himself. He took a ride up with some other talent to our show in May. We've been doing some pretty much like pre-show matches that we tape and put on TV as next up. Basically, anybody who's trained can get a look and get a match and get on our next up show. And Merrick did a match. It was so good that several of us were reacting. And right afterwards, now we were live streaming, so we have certain time constraints. But I asked Jerry with IWDV, it's like, hey, can we go ahead and put these guys in a singles match on the stream? Do we have the time? And he heavily endorsed it. And he went from me not knowing anything about him to being on a live stream that night. And pretty much at that point, he, when we decided we were definitely go on Futures, he had a spot. He did fill in for Hardway Heater, who had earned his way onto the tourney, and it's unfortunate he suffered an injury about a week before the show and wasn't able to be on. But Merrick was always going to be a part of the future show, so he just stepped up for one of the feature matches into a tournament spot. I was exceptionally happy with that match because it had probably had the most realism of the first three matches of Futures. Like, as in, these three are trying to fucking kill each other.
Oh, honestly, they went hard, bell to bell. It could have gone any of the three ways, in my opinion. But personally, I'm going to have to go with Billy Starks kind of overcoming these huge, huge, huge odds, defeating both Chase Holiday, someone I've witnessed knock out multiple opponents in the UWFI Contender Series, as well as Ron Bass Jr., who's just a big mountain of a man, just a rough and tumble, breakneck style of pro wrestling. But, I mean, again, just it ultimately came down to Robert Martyr winning the whole thing. And, I mean, the guy has the legitimate claims to make about this victory because, I mean, he didn't get announced. I mean, he had to earn his way in, defeating Brogan Finley, son of Fit Finley. And, I mean, even in the interview I had with him leading up to SCI, he said that he didn't care who was waiting for him at the end. He was going to go through whoever he had to win it. And honestly, all the congratulations to him. But now we sort of segue into that second night of tournament action, which, I mean, kicked off in the second round with Alex Kane defeating veteran John Davis, just going around the horn. What did you guys think of this match? We'll start again with AC.
What I loved most about that was Alex rising to the occasion. Him stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm defiant. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how much of that dude you are, I'm still gonna throw you. I love that attitude in Alex. I love it, and just to see that his personality and just how bad he wants it, and for him to actually, show up and show out, I was really proud of him for that. So that match was really dope to see.
Matt, your thoughts?
Oh man, John Davis is another person on Kane's list. So it's one of those. Well, that's the match I wanted anyway, so that works out perfectly. I've had at Action, we've had a very, very good track record with giving wrestlers the matches they want, and they generally tend to turn out really well because, if you want to match with another wrestler, you probably watch a lot of them, you're familiar with their moveset, so you've already got different ideas for somebody else that they can incorporate with what you do. I think I said it before that stylistically during the first night, a lot of people wanted to see Kane and Davis in the second round. I even got a text message from another wrestler who was sitting at home watching it saying that they wanted Kane and Davis. So it's like, well, guess what? You're going to be very happy. And this was a test for Alex. He still is. I mean, a very young wrestler. He's only been in our quote unquote universe for about 10 months. And with the pandemic still going on, he hasn't had as many shows with really good quality opponents that you might otherwise. So he stepped up. They threw each other the fuck around, and with that type of match, with the veteran attitude, John Davis really made him earn it. Obviously, John Davis was happy to work with Alex Kane, but he's also going to make him earn it. He's not just going to, all right, we're going to go out there for 6 or 7 minutes, and then when we're done, I'm going to lay down for you. He made him work his ass off, just like Manders did the night before. So Kane passed his two round 1 and round 2 tests with flying colors, and I'm proud of him for that because it's not easy when you're on such a big stage. And he has made us look, he said thank you to me several times, and I said, oh hey, all you did was reward the faith that we had in you.
And Dylan, your thoughts on the match?
Well, look, I'm an Alex Kane mark. I'm a John Davis mark going way back because I'm an old person. I think, to me, like from a storytelling perspective, everybody in this tournament needed a narrative going into the final. If you have a final where one person has a narrative, or 2, or even 3, it's not as interesting. And I think Kane sort of acquitted himself well as a guy who was simultaneously the wild card underdog because of his relative lack of experience, while also sort of being the heavy-hitting, bruising favorite in the sense of, you look at who else goes to the final and you think, okay, this guy went through 2 hosses, he beat them both, and now he's going to the final, and he won and his match was up first, right, in the second round. So the psychology there is interesting because you can make an argument that he's the underdog in the final, and you can make an argument that he's the favorite, especially given the sort of conditions of the rest of the contestants in that final, which we will talk about here in a second. But yeah, I thought the match was really good, but I thought the best thing about the match was how it sort of developed a credible narrative for Alex going into the final.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Kane, he looks like $1 million coming out of that match. I mean, he, like you said, Matt, he really had to earn that victory. And I mean, he earned it so to the point where, post-match, he got that rub from John Davis telling him, go win it, go take it home, And now, I mean, we move on to AC Mack taking on Jeremy Wyatt. And now AC, I mean, having been in the match, which first of all, I mean, you came in you were in at a little bit of a disadvantage with that limp, but then all of a sudden, Jeremy Wyatt ambushing you from behind while you're delivering your intro. I mean, can you take us on sort of the behind the music of that match?
Yes. Well, first of all, I really enjoyed the match. Being in there with Jeremy was, I ended up liking it way more than I thought I would. I always knew he was good, but man, putting that together with him, it really opened my eyes to what he can bring to the table. And I appreciate him so much for it, because the very first thing is he asked, what's the story here? What are we trying to accomplish? And I appreciated that so much because it's not every day that you hear that. You know, you're not always on the same page when it comes to that. So I really, really did appreciate that. And then we just wanted to do something different as far as, you know, I love doing my intro, but, you know, it's a 2-night tourney, 3 matches. I think they're going to get tired of it. So I wanted to, I wanted to switch it up. Last time we had Marco do it to kind of change it. And this time I was like, yes, please interrupt me. Yes. Let's start this thing off hot. Let's give them something different. I love the fact that we got to work my leg and just to kind of sell it the entire match and just kind of have to readjust and to do things differently. You know, the spots were a challenge now. You can't just run around all willy-nilly. You can't jump here as much as you want. So it was cool putting things together, knowing that was going to be the handicap, if that makes sense. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the finish was pretty good. Yeah, I'm definitely glad we were able to do that.
The finish was so good that it was the same finish you did in the building with Brett Eisen the last time you were in there. But that's neither here nor there. No, seriously, I actually liked that. I thought that the finish was very, very smart. And it kind of rewarded TWE fans too. You know, it's more of a happy accident than a planned thing, I'm sure. Unless AC is even smarter than I think he is, and I already think he's pretty smart. But, you know, I love this match because this is what tournament storytelling should be about. Jeremy Wyatt's an incredible wrestler. The narrative here is like, you know, AC enters the field and he's, like I said earlier, my personal belief was he was going to be halfway loved and halfway hated by that crowd. Because right now in the sort of universes that SCI is related to, he's a heel some places and a babyface others. And my thought process all along personally was the car needed to go in the direction of him having a huge triumphant moment. And in order for that to work, he needed to have a bad guy him. And taking away his entrance and then working on his leg, I thought that was the absolute right thing to do. I loved the structure of the match. I loved the finish. I thought AC's selling was incredible throughout the entire tournament. I am a stickler for selling. Anybody who's ever worked with me knows that. It is one of the things that drives me craziest about modern wrestling is guys who put in all this work on a body part and then they forget about it the second they go back to offense, and it just makes me so mad. And that was not the case here. I thought, you know, I'm not kissing his ass because he's on the line. I'm just telling the truth. I thought that was pretty damn good body part selling from AC Mack all damn tournament long. So I really, really enjoyed this match.
Oh, absolutely. Story-wise, I mean, I loved that there were points, AC, where, I mean, it was like you were going for broke with some of those moves with your bad leg, and then ultimately, in the end, just paying off for you all of those risk-reward factors going just for some of those moves. Now, Matt, your thoughts on the match?
Man, that's, again, you know, we had two opponents who don't really seem to lend themselves to AC Mack style, but I think that's a credit to you, AC, about how you can adapt and work with different opponents. You know, I hope you're happy with Jeremy Wyatt, because that's the type of match that, you know, is probably only going to happen in the type of an SCI environment. I thought honestly that this might be the best of the first four or the second round matches. I thought this might be the best of the second round matches, or at least my favorite, because they were able. I mean, they started hot. They kept it through. They did tell a story with AC having to overcome adversity. There were a lot of people who, when the match was announced on night one, thought that Wyatt was a shoe into the finals. So we were able to play with reactions there as well. I absolutely loved it. You know, just the evolution of over 2 nights of AC, from starting the show on night one to finishing the show on night two was really cool. If you can make people react in any sort of way, just at all, then that's a good thing. If you can make them react the way that you want them to, that's even better. And AC has that special skill.
And I mean, absolutely there. But I'm gonna spend the next minute or two just gushing over this next match. Daniel Makabe, Eric Royal, a rematch from Tampa Mania weekend. I did not expect to get this early, but it was such a tremendous follow-up to their first match back in April. I mean, I don't know, to me it felt like storytelling-wise, it felt like Makabe learned from that first encounter. He took his notes, he went into round 2, and he applied them right to work. And as the results will show, it's Makabe 1, Royal 1. Looking forward to the rematch whenever that happens, the rubber match rather. And I mean, I'm already kind of building it up in my head. It's going to just be this big 30-minute All Japan Kings Road classic, but that's the mental picture. That's the mental picture I'm having. But I'll start back with Dylan. What were your thoughts on this match?
Well, one thing that I noticed over the course of the weekend, and actually just in the days leading up to the weekend, is I'll just be perfectly candid about this. And since we're totally breaking down the walls, let's just break them all the way down. You're going to get full podcast mode Dylan Hales here. I'm even going to speak in the third person. But I was not involved in booking this year, but I was asked very, very early on who I thought should win. And there were 3 people who I thought had credible arguments, and Matt can vouch for this. I said they were Alex Kane, Daniel Makabe, and AC Mack. And AC was, if I had to pick my overall favorite, again, not because he's on the line, that's who I would have picked, but I would have been perfectly fine with either of those other 2. And I say this to say that I do think some people really did think that a back-to-back win was possible. But one thing that I was shocked by was how many people thought Eric Royal was winning the whole tournament. It should not have been surprising, but I think it is possible that among the people in the building, Eric Royal may have been the favorite to win the entire tournament. He was certainly the person that I heard mentioned the most as a pick, which I did not expect. And that's not a knock on Eric. I'm a long-standing Eric Royal fan. I've long said that he's one of the best wrestlers on the independents. But I think people thought in this match he was going to go up 2-0 on Daniel Makabe. I truly do, just based on the tone that I was hearing from people that weekend. I thought the match was great. I thought it was a great follow-up. It really was the kind of match, and this is not a surprise if you know anything about Ace or Dan, they really wanted to reward people who had seen the first match. So there were lots of things that played off of the first match, on which actually we would see something similar in the final when AC and Dan had their encounters. And I thought it was a great second piece. I also liked that it was worked in a sort of more tournament-y way. And what I mean by that is, you're not going to have 20 to 25 minutes, so you have to think more creatively about how you structure the match. I thought it was I thought the structure of the match, unsurprisingly, was very, very smart. I liked it a lot. I think, like you, I am excited for when we are able to eventually get to match 3, but I thought this was a very good match, also enhanced by the fact that we didn't mention this. We can't cover every single split second, but of course Makabe busted his head open at the Futures tournament, and so he's coming in with a bloody jersey and the blood, and like that added to the intensity as well. So to me, unsurprisingly, this was a great match. I'll put it that way. I'm not surprised it was a great match, but it was a great match, and I thought it just kind of continued to sort of set the trend. And I think now if you're looking at brackets and you're seeing the final, Makabe's coming in with a busted head. Yes, he's the defending champion, but the final will have been his 5th match that weekend. He's the only person that's wrestled that much, and he's got that head wound. Of course, AC can barely walk coming into the final. But Alex Kane, even though he'd been in there with some hosses, was relatively healthy. So then the question becomes, what's going to be the story for the last prospective entrant? And of course, we'll cover that in a second.
And Matt, circling over to you. I mean, your thoughts on the match?
I mean, as soon as we had both definite, and the reason Daniel Makabe was 16th is just because we weren't absolutely positive he was going to be able to get here. We did find out fairly late that he in the announcing, but basically we only confirmed it about a week or 2 before he was announced, and as pretty much as soon as he confirmed, well, that was when we decided there was going to be match 2. We could have done a longer match if we had done it on night 1, but I really like the idea of doing it as a surprise, and for the second match being shorter than the first one. I really kind of, again, I like to underpromise and overdeliver. I loved it. I loved it. And for what it's worth, they both liked it a lot better. There was definitely, it helped with commentary because we had the same commentators, Dylan and Jumpin' Johnny Mosley, who called the match in Tampa. So they were the ones who gave voice to the first match. So there's that continuity of they're obviously intimately familiar with it. And Daniel and Eric are both going to want to do things that call back to the first match. I mean, I was super happy with it, and I do wish we could have given them another 4 or 5 minutes. But I think the shorter match also does make it anticipated that there's going to be a third, and I definitely want and hope there will be a third.
Oh, as do I. But now, AC, tell us your thoughts on Makabe versus Royal 2.
Yes, I second all of that. I definitely want there to be a third. I want to be in the building when that match happens. I love both these guys. I really do, and I love the chemistry that they have with each other. The story is the story is just, I'm better than you, and I want to prove it. And sometimes a black horse is just a black horse. It works. It works, and I love that for both of them. We mentioned Makabe coming in busted. It added an element. I 100% agree. And also, with people thinking Royal was going to win, I saw that, and I heard it in the reaction. I love how they react to Royal in that building. It's incredible. It is incredible. And it's so cool that he gets, he's coming out with that Action Championship. So it really made me smile. I love both those guys. I've been in the ring with both of them. And it's very fluid, and they know what they're doing. They're at their best. So as many times as they can go at it, I'm 100% down. I want to see. Of course, I want to be in there with them to make it a triple threat. But if it's just one-on-one, I'm definitely down for that too. Just as long as they're going at it, I'm fine.
And now we segue into our final semifinals match with Daniel Garcia taking on Jaden Newman. I mean, Garcia, I gotta show a little bit up north favoritism here. I mean, I loved him coming out draped in the C4 ESW and Limitless Wrestling title belts. I thought that was a tremendous visual.
Yes.
For this match.
I was
jealous. I mean, just like, I mentioned before in the first round, Jaden Newman, someone that the fans have a lot of emotional stock and just feel for, taking on the big sort of up north guy who's been on TV, who's getting all these huge opportunities. This truly had to be some huge match for the crowd. And again, Dylan, I'm going to have to start off with you because you know about that TWE area crowd better than myself. So please tell us your thoughts on the match.
I thought, so again, I'll just say it. I thought Jaden Newman really needed to have a match where he was in there with somebody who's a top level independent guy and he hung in there with him. Now, I want to be clear, that's not the first time he's done that, but Jaden is one of these guys, and I think both Matt and AC will back me up on this, who has had to prove himself really 2 or 3 times over. He started in wrestling, and there was a bunch of the regional vets hated the guy. He's a teenage kid, who had a lot of support and help from his family in ways that people resented, and he got labeled like as a guy who didn't deserve anything he had almost immediately. The irony is, because of that, he actually worked harder than almost any of those guys who talk shit about him for years, because most of those guys ended up being 40-miler washouts. And I don't even hate a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys I like personally. I'm just stating things that are incontrovertible facts. And the reality is that Jaden had to work extra hard because of that. And I think Jaden still is one of these guys where now he's sort of going through that with a segment of the hardcore fan community where there's people who just don't fully buy him 100% yet. They're just not quite all in. But I think, my brother Dustin, who sat in the front row, and is not involved in wrestling, is anything other than a fan. He sent me a text message after this match. And, you know, I'm going to go full X-rated and just say exactly what it said. What he said is, if anybody doesn't think Jaden Newman is a very good wrestler after that, they're a fucking idiot. And that's basically how I felt about his performance all week long in that building. I thought he really held his own with Garcia. They did a great job using every second of time they had. I thought they told a really interesting story because the night before, Jaden Newman had made Brett Ison tap in that building. Nobody does that. And the story was kind of Jaden kept going for that Hangman's submission and the Hangman's clutch, and he wasn't able to get it. That's what it won against Brett. And in the end, maybe an over-reliance on that almost sort of cost him, right? And I think that was very smart. I thought the match was very well put together. I think you can watch that match and very clearly know why Daniel Garcia is regarded as one of the best wrestlers in the world. He's great at pushing pace while simultaneously selling, for example, which is something that very few people understand how to do. But, you know, to me, this was a match where Jaden really established himself as a credible player. But I think the story coming out of this as well was, okay, now we got a guy the day before he's wrestling for the IWTV Independent World Championship. He's going in there and he's looking to run a clean sweep because now he's defeated the hometown favorite and he's going into the final. And there was a little tease with his leg and stuff at the end of that match as well, which I thought added some depth. But the important thing to me coming out of this was Jaden held his own against one of the best in the world, and Garcia proved himself to be one of the best of the world. So you had this narrative going into the final of the guy who might be the best wrestler on the independents that might win the world title the next day is there. You got Alex Kane, the guy who's like this weird hybrid of a favorite because of his bruising style and an underdog because he's still relatively new. And then you've got the two guys that have been in the final in 2019, each nursing different injuries coming into the final. I thought the narrative was great, and it made my job as a commentator extremely easy for that main event because each person had a clear story.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, like you mentioned, the tease with the foot. I mean, I honestly thought that there was something serious going on right there when he, like, immediately following the fall, he just untied the boot, took it off, trying to reduce the swell, I guess you could say.
That actually freaked me out for a second, and I was like, "Wait, what's happening?"
Oh, same here. I mean, he's gonna have to go in the finals, and on top of that, he's gonna have to be well enough to go take on Yuta the next day. But AC Mack, I mean, what are your thoughts on this big match with Garcia and Newman?
And like Dylan said, Jaden is somebody that has to prove himself over and over again, and I think that makes him even more impressive that he's able to prove himself time and time and time again. I will be honest, I didn't see a whole lot of this match, but I do like both individuals. And for Jaden, this industry, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot of great people in it, doesn't have a whole lot of nice people in it. You know, it doesn't have a whole lot of people who have good intentions. However, Jaden is one of them. He is somebody of pure heart. He is somebody that I 100% want to see succeed. So I'm really happy he's getting his flowers. I'm really happy he was able to get in there with Garcia, who I do think is one of the best today. He was definitely on my 2021 list. So I have a lot of respect for Garcia, and it was so dope to see Jaden hang with him and prove once again that he belongs in this space. So I'm proud of him. I'm happy that match was able to happen.
And I got to say as well, too, I mean, ever since first seeing Jaden Newman through watching Southern Underground Pro, I couldn't put my finger on what exactly, but I knew, I mean, Jaden Newman had it, you know, just looking at the guy, you know that he just has it, you know, wrestling-wise, character-wise, promo-wise. I mean, he's like a total package, and you could just see it by looking at the guy. But, Matt, your thoughts on this battle?
I mean, I was just so the other day. Gosh, I forget who, but I retweeted it and I just posted some of the matches that Jay Newman has had just this year, and it was with top-notch opponents. And I can't think of a single one of them where he was not hanging and totally able to be at the same level and give it back. And, you know, not in short 6-minute matches either. I mean, he had a long match, a long brutal match with JD Drake here in action. He's wrestled Akira in TWE. He wrestled, it was last year, but he wrestled a big match with Anthony Henry on the SUP show in October. He's had a lot of chances to hang, so I'm very happy that he could, but that wasn't a surprise at all. And Jaden in that building is very special and has a real intensity to it. The problem I think that Jaden had in his career is he got in so young, and he didn't always get the best advice, which unfortunately is true of a lot of young wrestlers who get caught up with, let's just say, veterans who aren't really veterans. They've just been around a long time. So
let me say it. Let me say it, Matt. Let me say it. You can learn how to work a crowd from a 40-miler, but you can't learn how to make it. You can't learn. And any of them who says they can is lying, because if they knew, they wouldn't be 40-milers. All right, there we go.
And the 40-milers are just those who they want to have, because by virtue of they think that 10 or 15 years in the business has given them something, has earned them something, and they know how to work their small towns that they work in front of every 2 weeks, and that's all they know. I think Jaden, unfortunately, he didn't always have the best advice. Another young wrestler that I've been kind of mentoring, I'll just say, I've said to some of his friends that I don't think until he started with us that he really had anybody who cared about his career. He was used for his abilities, and I think Jaden is somebody that, he essentially got gifted a wrestling promotion at a very young age. So there were those who didn't react well, and he's had to really come from behind, but that has instilled a certain work ethic, because he's had to work harder than everybody else. That's more of a philosophy of what I see when I see and am around Jade Newman. But Daniel Garcia is in that conversation of top 3 or 5 independent wrestlers in the country. It's deservedly so. And Jaden was with him their entire match. There wasn't anything where he was lost or outclassed. And that's not easy.
Absolutely. I mean, he can honestly, off of that performance too, I mean, he can only skyrocket up from there, and I truly hape he does, to make those huge indie stages like going forward.
And he had a really, I haven't had it discussed or really talked about, but he had a really unique pressure that nobody else had, because that was his building. He had to deliver in a match, and everybody knows that Brett and Jaden can have a good match, but they have to actually go out and do it. And then he's wrestling. He's got a singles match with Daniel Garcia. Well, he's got to go ahead and prove it, but he's got to do it in front of, like, not just wrestling fans, but friends and family. He's not just going to get the benefit of the doubt because he works in this building twice a month. That's very difficult.
Oh, absolutely. But before we move on to that big finals main event, I gotta point out the big headline. I mean, the Scenic City Scramble, Damian Tangra coming out on top of the scramble. Not only did he win the right to alternate for any of the finalists who weren't going to be able to make it due to injury, per you, Matt, he is the first official entrant in SCI 2022. Now, I want to rebound it right back to you, Matt. Could you let us in on kind of what kind of came to that decision for Tangra to be officially the first man in for 2022?
Well, Scott Hensley and I, before the weekend, we talk about 2022 very early, who we would want in. I've already got an interest list of 12 wrestlers who are outside of our general family of wrestlers that I'm going to kind of tinker with that and keep my eye on, because realistically, we're going to have this show just about booked out 6 months in advance. Generally, we start really in February at laying and plotting out who's going to be in it and where, so that we can start the announcements like end of February, beginning of March. So ideally, hopefully, we're going to be back to that. That's not that far away. Damien Tanger was somebody that I had told Scott that, you know, I definitely want him in. He's wrestled in, you know, Southern Underground Pro and Paradigm. He had a really, really good match that I can't wait for you to see on Thursday night at TWE with Daniel Makabe. He had the match on Futures with he and Alex Kane against Daniel Makabe and locksmith Brandon Williams. But about a week before, Scott had this idea, and it wasn't my idea. I mean, I did want Tanger in 2022. That was already set. But Scott had this idea, and I basically told them, it's like, all right, I don't even want to tell Dylan and Mose on commentary. So they had no idea, because I wanted them to have a legit reaction. And this is the only kind of thing. It's like the match can be good, but the reaction has to be great. If the match is great, but the reaction is only so good, you can't do it. So thankfully, the match, first scramble match, was right there. People were excited. Timing was good. People were excited with who won. Halfway through the match, I said to Scott, "I'm a yes," and he said, "I'm a yes too." And then he turns to me and right after the match and says, "Yes." I'm like, I was basically like, "Yep, let's do it." So that's where we decided we were gonna go ahead and just set up next year with only a couple shows, and we don't know if we're going to be able to have a November show. We don't know if we're going to have a Scenic City Rumble, you know, so who knows? The next SCI show might be next year. So why not start plotting and piecing those, dripping those things out there? And Damien's worked hard. He's one of my favorite wrestlers to watch, and he's one of my favorite people in wrestling. He got back into action when we started back from the pandemic because he just said, "Hey, you know, is it okay if I come by and what time do I need to be there for setup?" And then he said it a month later. So when we had a spot, we were going to be debuting Alex Kane actually, and Dylan and I thought Tanger would be good for that because, well, we knew he was going to be there in any case because he's very reliable, and it's like, let's reward somebody whose work I already like. He had already appeared in action and was in the field in 2019 Futures, and he had a really good 2.5 minute match, which ain't easy. Then he had a good match with Cabana Man Dan, which Dan's very good, so that is easier, but it still was a very good 7-minute match. And after that, it was basically like, well, I want you on everything. And he listened. He went out and he has really tried to prove it on the road. He's been, you know, he's got his own YouTube page. He's got a Patreon. He's really trying to use everything he can to get himself over and tell his story. And he really was in some ways like an ideal person to invite for 2022 because he's been telling the story through videos on Patreon and through social media about what it meant to him to wrestle Daniel Makabe on Thursday night because he was in Futures the year Daniel Makabe won SCI, and now they're going to be facing off as equals. So we know that over the next year, Damien will continue to improve in the ring. He will tell that story. He will carry the SCI banner and the Action Wrestling banner and the Southern Underground Pro banner. So he was about the perfect guy to be able to surprise. So his reaction that you saw when I did that was surprise.
Man, a well deserved entry into next year's SCI, and the Scenic City events may be uncertain even in the next year. What is certain is, as of this posting, tonight will be Action Wrestling, and he and Alex Kane will be taking on two men who've been kind of two pains in the neck in your side, being Shug D and Kevin Ryan the Good Hand. Do you think the combined force of Kane and Tanger will be enough to take care of Shug and Kevin?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that in a non-kayfabe way.
Here, I'll answer it. Let me answer that. Let me answer this. Let me answer this as quick as I can. If you want to know the answer to that, then on Thursday night, August 19th, 2021 at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you should tune in to iwtv.live because the premiere of this Friday's action event will be streaming then. So there's your answer.
All right. Good enough answer for me. But now we roll into the big climax of the weekend, the big 4-way SCI finals. AC Mack, Daniel Makabe, Daniel Garcia, and Alex Caden. Starting off with you, AC. I mean, having wrestled 2 previous matches over the past day or so and going into a long 4-man finals, I mean, walk us through just where you were at in that match and how you got through it.
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I was extremely nervous. I was extremely nervous, especially since, we had to put it together in such a short time and, trying to pay attention to the show. But we got this final and they gave us 30 minutes and, you have to deliver. That's the only option. So I was a little nervous, but excited to be in there with Makabe finally, to be in there with Alex Cain again. It's been 2-3 years since we got to work. And to be in there with Garcia, who I mentioned earlier, was on my 2021 list. So, man, my mind was all over the place. I love that there were moments in the match where we got to slow it down and just kind of be in the moment, you can see your opponents across the ring and you're not running anything. You're not doing anything. You're just kind of soaking it in before all that happens. Stuff like that is what makes it special to me. The little small things like that. What was running through my head, make sure you don't forget to sell this leg.
That's right.
I was so excited to get to me and Makabe, but I didn't want to rush anything else. I wanted everything to have its due. I wanted Alex Cain to look like $1 million. I wanted, everybody up north to be proud of Danny Garcia and what he was doing. I didn't want to take away from any of that, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking forward to that final moment when, we called it and we said, all right, boom, Mac 10, he's out. And then we're just corner to corner. We didn't plan the whole seating thing across from each other for me and Makabe, but I'm so glad we did it. It just worked. I got some dope pictures from that. But that's what I was getting to. That's the moment that I wanted. Me and him just across the ring from each other. I love long-term storytelling and callbacks. That's what made me fall in love with wrestling. So to actually be in that moment 2 years later, it was a beautiful thing. I'm a crybaby in real life, so I couldn't help it at the end. But I was just so happy that we were able to pay that off. So that's what was going through my head.
You're absolutely correct about the moments. I mean, you mentioned, the people up north, you want them to be proud of Garcia, but honestly, I gotta be honest and say, when Makabe hit that wind-up punch and set you up for the Mac 10 and you guys eliminated him, that popped the hell out of me.
It popped the hell out of me, and I didn't know what they were doing right before going into it, but I knew that it was going to be something like that. But it popped the hell out of me. So even when I knew it was coming, so that was classic. That was a great moment.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, at that point, some people probably considered Garcia to be the big shark in the water, and just to say like that big punch into a Mac 10, that was like the 2 guys from last year's final putting it together to make the final again.
I mean, using your observer brain, you might think that it's like, all right, well, IWTV now is going to want Daniel Garcia to win because he's challenging Wheeler Yuta, and he can just go up there with the trophy. So I think there was a lot of, it's like, oh, well, Makabe could be the first two-time winner. The inspiration when we did decide it was going to be Mac and Garcia, or Mac and Makabe, and Garcia was in the final before we had it confirmed and knew that IWTV was going to run that match. So, but Makabe and Mac was like, all right, have another full NBA season, and at the end of the year, it's still the Celtics against the Lakers in the finals. It's been 2 years.
Dated reference. dated reference though. You could tell the era me and Matt grew up in.
But I get it though, and I finally get a dated reference.
I mean, I'm a basketball fan, so the Warriors and the Heat, sure, but you know that was just and with what we wanted to tell, it was like, you know, who knows if and when you'd ever have the chance to be able to do this exact story again.
Yeah.
So if I have not been able to watch the match yet, but I was feeding a lot of that to Mose on commentary with what my legit inspiration was, so that they could hopefully work and get some of that over.
Dylan, I gotta send it over to you with your thoughts on the match.
Well, I loved it because it was easy to do commentary for, and by God, by that point, I needed a break because that was the last match of the third show I had done in about 36 hours, and here I am bitching. I ain't got to take bumps, but I mean, I was seriously concerned, and knowing that I had to do IWTV 100 the next day, you know, I really was appreciative of the fact that there was going to be a final with 4 guys I trusted, who I knew were going to tell an interesting story. Full disclosure, number whatever. I should have at least elicited a snicker from AC and Matt, but whatever. I ran outside at intermission. I sprinted outside at intermission to the back where they were putting the 4-way together. So I kind of had an idea of what they were going to do. And Makabe and I had talked about some things here and there, some ideas he had coming in, but I wanted to make sure the structure was sound. And I also wanted to kind of talk to AC a little bit about the how the show was going to end. So like I ran back in. I barely was like back to commentary in time. The show, you know, we came back from intermission, and I was barely back in time because I had gone back there then to sort of figure out what was what for the final. So when the final came out, I kind of had an idea of what they were going to do, but I didn't know all the final finer points. And I thought that the storytelling was great. I said this on social media, but to me, the gold standard final for Scenic City is 2016. I'll say it. I did not think this was as good as 2016, but that's a tall hill. I mean, that is a very tall hill. And if I'm being honest about it, I don't know that any match for the final is ever going to touch that. Match had a lot of advantages, not the least of which is that the best independent professional wrestler who's ever lived was in it, and Chris Hero, which helps. But I thought this match was the second best final in the history of the tournament. And I thought it was the most satisfying conclusion because it completed the arc of the last couple of years, and really longer than that. You know, I mean, I'll say it. AC probably doesn't want to say it, but I'll say it. I know he probably wasn't thrilled about not being in the tournament a couple of years ago and being told, "Oh, we're just got a scramble spot for you." You know, I'm sure that didn't feel great at the time because he had already been champion a lot of places in the Southeast, and he was already kind of deemed a prospect by a lot of people. But there was, even then, you know, and I'm not on the booking team for Scenic City anymore, but I think it's fair to say that I do a little bit more than just commentate. And even then, I knew that there was going to be a long-term arc that was eventually going to end with him winning the tournament. And the way it played out, there's no way we could have envisioned that when he was in his first scramble. What was it? I guess 2018. There's no way we could not have possibly envisioned how we would get there, but how we ended up getting there, I think it could not have possibly been better. I even think there's sort of like a twisted, like sort of interesting poetic justice in the fact that it happened in the TWE building.
Yes.
Which was one of the first promotions where AC ever had a break and was ever a champion. Yes. So I don't want to speak for you, but for me, that was kind of cool too. And yes. I loved the match. I watched it back early this morning, and it was, I liked it live. I loved it when I watched it back. I thought they did excellent. I thought everybody played their roles perfectly. And the final chapter with you and Daniel was incredible, AC.
Thank you.
So, and just to add, we wanted to do a little bit more. 2019 was supposed to be more like this, but when Daniel Makabe got his ear busted in the second round, we had to radically change and very quickly how that was going to happen. So that changed a lot. And they really wanted to do the 2016 match with tags and have it be a longer style and not like a multi-man where everyone's in there.
Yeah.
So
I
much
will
better.
say I will
So
never
much better.
forget that moment of us scrambling in that bathroom trying to figure out what we're gonna do.
Man, there should have been a documentary on that day of the 2019 tournament.
Yes.
We show up to the venue and there's a flood with a pipe busted. Like the Makabe gets his ear ripped off versus Slim J. Then we got to restructure the entire final. I mean, it was a day, but that was magic. And I don't wish. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish Daniel hadn't got hurt that day. But the reality is, I don't know that the story is as great as it was for this tournament if things did not happen as they did in 2019. So magic comes in strange ways sometimes,
Absolutely. And I mean, to focus in on UAC, I mean, what does winning the Scenic City Invitational Tournament mean to you?
It means a lot. I remember when I first started to train at the 4 with Fox. And we first started kind of getting our wings out there and going to different places. And SCI, it was and is the place to be. I remember the very first time going to the Rumble. I think that might have been 2017. And all I knew was that at every show that I did, all of the big names, everybody who was important, everybody who ran anything was on that show. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I need to be there. And that was why we came up. And so to kind of hit the ground running and just kind of hit every checkpoint in SCI along the way and to finally get the crown jewel, I think it means a lot. It's really cool. I didn't think I was even going to get that far in 2019. And so for it to come around this year and to not only get as far as I did last time, but to even win it means that much more. The amount of love that I've been getting since the win has been incredible. The entire week has been nothing but messages and comments and just praise from people all over the country. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I could go on for days, but I'm really, really happy that they picked me and they believed in me. So,
and for the record, AC knew nothing.
Nothing.
When we cut his night one promo, the only thing he knew at that time is that he was going to be wrestling beef, I think. No, we had actually had a real quick conversation. I'm like, all right, you're, like about maybe an hour and a half before. And, he found out he was going to wrestle Jeremy Wyatt, but he knew very, very little. That's something.
Makabe stooped it off.
What?
On night 2 though, not night 1.
No, not on night 1. Correct. Wasn't it during Futures or was it right after?
No, it was right before we sat down.
It was right before.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but because he said in the car ride over, can we just go ahead and tell him?
I walked over. I was on the opposite side of the room. I don't remember what I was doing, and I walked over and I saw AC's eyes, and I was like, "Oh, they must have just told him he's winning." because you had this look in your face that was like a combination of excitement and nerves, and I was like, "Oh, they must have just told him," and then they just told him. So that was kind of cool.
And it's so funny because I went in thinking 100% that Garcia was going to win. And I wasn't even mad about it. It just made sense to me, especially since, the very next day it was the IWTV 100 show. It just made sense. He had been on TV, AEW, so I didn't think anything of it. I had friends hitting me up personally and was like, "Oh, are you winning?" And I was like, "No, I don't think it's this year. I think it's going to Garcia." And so now they think I'm a liar.
Listen. If the worst thing they can say about you is that you're a liar, well, I guess that is pretty bad. Actually, never mind. No. Look, I'll just say it before we wrap or whatever. As somebody, this is the first year since I was not involved in the booking in 2015. This is the first year since then where I was not directly involved in the booking. I mean, Matt and Scott asked me my opinions on some things. I think it's fair to say I probably influenced some things here and there, but by and large, they were driving the car this year. And I think they did a great job. I really do. And I was very, very happy to be able to be a part of a tournament that I thought did something the right way. You know, we got to where we needed to get to, and I think we put the trophy in the hands of somebody who has been the standard bearer across the Southeast really for the last 3 years, in my opinion. And again, I'm not kissing AC's ass because he'll be the first to tell you that I'll rip him if I think he doesn't perform. But like, I really do think he's been this overall standard bearer in the Southeast for the last 3 years. And, you know, this was his year to win. And regardless of what was going to happen the next day with Daniel Garcia, and Lord knows that match was incredible.
Yeah.
The truth is, to me, you know, I said early on that, like, when I was asked who my 3 guys were, but Matt will vouch for me on this. My argument all along was, you got 3 options in my mind, but AC should win this thing. And I was very, very happy when that was the decision that was made, and the path on how to get there I thought was correct. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was fun. I thought it was exciting. And thank God it was easy to do commentary for, because when it's convoluted, boy, does it suck. And they made my night super, super easy. And let me tell you, I was super worried because I didn't even tell a lot of people I was doing commentary on IWTV 100. And the reason why is I was afraid my voice was going to be gone and I wasn't going to be able to by the time we got there. And I just, you know, professionally, overall for me, even though my fingers were not in the booking this year very much, if at all, I think this was the most rewarding weekend for me in some ways that I've ever had in wrestling, because I got to do commentary on the tournament, a tournament where I was super happy with the winners of both tournaments, really. And then I got to do IWTV 100 and check off some bucket lists for me personally. So, yeah, I was super pleased with everything.
Oh, and I mean, to cap it all off, you ended the night in a very big way. You called your shot. You said, I got next, either Yuta or Garcia. I'm coming for the IWTV Independent World Championship. How soon are you looking to take on Wheeler Yuta?
As soon as possible. As soon as possible. It's been what, 2 years now, I want to say, since we had our interactions and beyond. So I want to face him yesterday. That's how soon.
I don't know who's going to be the first to jump on it, but I hope it happens soon.
There's options. There's options on the table. There's places it could happen. And, you know, I mean, I'm going to slide into promoter mode real quick as I continue to hijack this podcast and act like it's about me. The truth is, you know, if you watched IWTV 100, you know, there's a lot of people that stake their claim at the end of that show. Trisha Dora, Matt Mikowski, John Wayne Murdoch, Marcus Mathers, a very good professional wrestler. Garcia went to a draw. It's not like he was beat. And there's some dispute about how that match ended. However, the one who staked their claim first, I must say, as a cheerleader and IWTV employee, is the one on this phone call right now. And this is a person that has a credible claim, because not only did he pin Daniel Garcia in the Scenic City Invitational final, but he has had a long-standing issue with Wheeler Yuta that we've never been able to resolve, that was supposed to take place on March 15th of last year, actually at Southern Underground Pro, but the pandemic prevented that, along with an untimely injury to Yuta. So this is something that's been hanging around. The Yuta AC issue has been hanging around, like AC said, for a year and a half, 2 years now. And there's a dynamic there that has not been fully tapped. And I'm inside of the IWTV world. That is my job. That is how I pay the bills. But I am also going to be lobbying for AC to get the title opportunity as soon as it's feasible. And if I know one thing about AC Mack, I know that if he doesn't get his opportunity sooner than later, he's going to find a way to wreak havoc. So because that's what he does. So we'll leave it at that.
Boy, I wonder if there's any shows coming up soon where you might be able to make your thoughts known, AC.
Absolutely. Anywhere I show up, anywhere I'm at is an opportunity to make my thoughts known. There's another, I mean, hell, we got Action Friday. Maybe I might say a little something.
Or when do you say anything about action? Like we've ever let you have a live mic.
You said what now?
Like we've ever let you have a live mic.
Known to piss a few people off. I love it. I love that Southern energy. Just like Southern rap in the 90s, man. We just gonna keep knocking and we just gonna bust through the door until you accept that we're here. And we'll do that by any means.
I'm gonna quote some young bloods on commentary for AC on tomorrow night. We'll do deep cuts. I'll do some real hidden tracks there. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up.
Well, gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining me on this SCI recap. I want to go around the table just for please let people know where we can find you, where we can support you. AC, you're the guest of honor. Please let the people know where we can find you.
Thank you. I'm AC Mack everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. It's all AC Mack, I promise. You can get the merch at Pro Wrestling Tees or What a Maneuver. You can catch me obviously at Action. That's my home. I got North Carolina coming up, Chicago coming up, Indiana coming up. So we're doing some big things. Just AC Mack. Just that's the search.
Matt, where can we find you? Where can we support you?
Well, me personally, I'm on Twitter at Matt the Mouth. You can follow Scenic City at SCI Tournament. You can follow Action Wrestling at Wrestle Action and the number 1. And I hope if you've been with us for 2+ hours that you will check out. If you haven't yet, or please go rewatch if you want to add a little bit of a different dimension. But both nights of the Scenic City Invitational, of course, Action Futures is up as well. That's on the Action channel. And we've got plenty. We've got over 40 action wrestling events on our channel as well. So you can see the rise of AC Mack from our first show and our first match, the first wrestler out on our first show in April 2018 to win. Now he's won SCI and he's calling out the independent champion. So you can watch that on the Action Wrestling channel on IWTV.
Dylan Hales, where can we find you and where can we support you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dylan Waco. That's DYLANWACO. All the aforementioned promotions that have been covered on this podcast, you can follow all of this as well, including Southern Underground Pro. That's at SUP_Graps on Twitter. You can follow IndependentWrestling.tv on Twitter at Indie Wrestling. That's INDIE as God intended, not the false INDY. And go over to IWTV.live, subscribe. You can watch all of the matches we've talked about on this podcast, as well as IWTV 100, as well as Southern Underground Pro, as well as all sorts of other AC Mack matches and other promotions that I'm not going to mention for political reasons. You can watch all of them on IWTV.live. There's a whole. I was hoping you'd laugh at that. There's a whole slew of stuff you can watch on IWTV. Check it out. $10 a month, and you can't beat it.
AC, Dylan, Matt, thank you all so much for joining me tonight, and thank you all for listening to this special SCI wrap-up here on Pro Wrestling Ponderings. I'm James Lascuola, and I will see you all on the next one.